My fated mate rejected me on my 18th birthday. He called me a runt. He chose my sister. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I walked up the forbidden mountain and knocked on the door of the one man my ex fears most. Now I'm back. I'm wearing a crown. And the alpha who rejected me, he's on his knees. Not because he loves me, but because his father commanded it. Chapter 1. The Public Execution. The drums of the Moonstone Pack beat in time with my heart, too fast, too loud, and terrified. Tonight was the blood moon. Tonight was my 18th birthday. Tonight Jackson, the alpha heir, the boy who had kissed me behind the bleachers and promised me forever, would finally claim me as his mate. I stood in the center of the great hall wearing a white dress that my mother had spent 3 months sewing. The air smelled of pine, roasted meat, and the thick, heady musk of shifting wolves. Hundreds of eyes bore into me. They weren't looking at me with respect. They were looking with pity. I was Astrid, the runt, the girl who hadn't shifted yet. But it didn't matter. Jax had promised. Power doesn't make a queen, Astrid. He had whispered just last night. Heart does. The drums stopped. The heavy oak doors creaked open. Jackson strode in. He looked like a god of war, his shoulders broad, his jaw set, his black hair swept back. The alpha aura coming off him was so strong it made the knees of the weaker wolves buckle. My breath hitched. He was beautiful. He was mine. He walked up the dais to where his father, the current alpha of Moonstone, stood waiting. But Jax didn't stop at the altar. He kept walking until he stood right in front of me. I smiled, tears pricking my eyes. I reached out a hand. Jax. He didn't take it. He looked down at me, his eyes cold, colder than I had ever seen them. There was no love there, only calculation. Astrid, he said, his voice booming through the silent hall, you look beautiful. Thank you, I whispered, trembling. Beautiful, he repeated, and completely useless. The crowd gasped. My hand froze in midair. What? Jax turned to the crowd, raising his voice so every wolf from the front row to the balcony could hear. A pack is only as strong as its Luna. The Luna is the shield that guards the heart of the pack. She must be fierce. She must be strong. She must carry the next generation of alphas. He turned back to me, a sneer curling his lip. Look at you. You can't even shift. You are a genetic dead end, Astrid. You are a defect. Jax, please, I choked out, the room spinning. You promised. I promised to do what is best for the pack, he interrupted, and mating with a runt is not best for the pack. He took a step back, raising his voice to a shout. I, Jackson Blackwood, reject Astrid Vance as my mate. The bond in my chest, the golden thread that had connected me to him since childhood, snapped. The pain was physical. It felt like a serrated knife twisting in my heart. I fell to my knees, clutching my chest, a scream tearing from my throat. But he wasn't done. However, Jax continued, stepping over my kneeling form as if I were a piece of furniture. The moon goddess does not make mistakes. She merely tests us. I need a mate who carries the same blood but stronger. Better. He extended his hand toward the shadow of the pillars. Ivy, come forward. My blood ran cold. Ivy walked out of the shadows. My sister. My stunning, tall, perfect sister who had shifted at 16. She was wearing a dress of deep crimson silk, the color of a Luna. She walked past me, her heels clicking on the stone floor, and took Jax's hand. She didn't look at me with sympathy. She smiled, a cruel, triumphant smile. I accept your rejection, Astrid, Jax said, looking at Ivy with hungry eyes, and I mark Ivy as my true Luna. He bit into her neck. The crowd erupted in cheers, and as my sister moaned in pleasure, I lay on the floor, forgotten, bleeding from a broken heart. Chapter 2. The Choice. The celebration lasted for hours. I knew because I could hear the music from the alleyway behind the kitchen where I sat in the mud. It had started raining. The cold water mixed with the hot tears on my face, but I couldn't feel the chill. I was numb. The rejection had hollowed me out, leaving nothing but a gaping void where my soul used to be. The back door opened. Light spilled out, illuminating the garbage bins I was leaning against. My mother stepped out, holding a bag of trash. Mom, I croaked, trying to stand up. My legs shook. Mom, please, it hurts. I need to go home. My mother froze. She looked at me, her daughter shivering in the mud, humiliated in front of the entire pack. Then she looked back toward the warmth of the pack house, where Ivy was currently being toasted as the new Luna. Go home? My mother whispered, her voice trembling. Astrid, you embarrassed us. I blinked, the rain dripping into my eyes. What? Jackson is the future alpha, she hissed, tossing the trash bag into the bin next to me. Ivy is the Luna. Do you have any idea what kind of position you've put this family in? If we comfort you, it looks like we're siding against the alpha. I'm your daughter, I screamed, the sound raw and broken. Ivy is my daughter, she said coldly. You're just a liability. Jackson has made it clear. You are no longer welcome in the main house. You can sleep in the stables with the Omegas until you figure out where you're going. She turned around and slammed the door. The lock clicked. I stared at the metal door for a long time. The silence of the night wrapped around me, heavier than the rain. They expected me to break. They expected me to crawl into the hay, sleep with the horses, and wake up tomorrow to serve breakfast to my sister and the man who broke me. They thought I was weak. I looked down at my hands. They were trembling, but not from cold anymore. They were trembling from rage. A hot, burning coal of hate ignited in my stomach. I will not serve them, I thought. I will not bow. I turned away from the pack house. I didn't look back at the warm windows or the life I was leaving behind. I looked toward the north, toward the mountains, toward the deadwoods. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew that. The deadwoods were the territory of the exiled king, Vincent. The stories said he was a monster, a Lycan as old as the mountains themselves, who crushed skulls with his bare hands. He was the one man Jackson's father feared. He was the one name that made the pack tremble. He was also Jackson's father. The secret was whispered in dark corners, never spoken aloud. Jax bragged about his bloodline, but he never visited the king. He hated him. He feared him. If I wanted to hurt Jax, if I wanted to burn his world to ash, I needed fire, and the only fire hot enough to burn an alpha was a king. I wiped the mud from my face. I wasn't the runt anymore. I was a girl with nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. I started walking north. Chapter 3. The King of Night. The journey took 3 days. By the time I reached the iron gates of the obsidian fortress, my dress was in tatters, my feet were bleeding, and I hadn't eaten in 48 hours. The fortress was carved directly into the black rock of the mountain. It didn't look like a home, it looked like a tomb. Gargoyles shaped like screaming wolves perched on the battlements, staring down with hollow stone eyes. The air here was thin and smelled of metallic snow and ancient blood. I stumbled toward the gate, my vision blurring. Let me in, I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. The massive iron gates didn't budge, but suddenly the shadows moved. 2 gigantic wolves, each the size of a horse, materialized from the mist. Their fur was matted with scars, their eyes glowing red. They weren't normal shifters. They were Lycans, guards. They growled low in their throats, the sound vibrating through my bones. I didn't run. I couldn't. I just fell to my knees. I need to see the king, I gasped. One of the wolves shifted. Bones cracked and reformed until a towering man stood before me, naked and unashamed. He grabbed me by the hair, hauling me up. Trespasser, he spat. The king doesn't see strays. He eats them. Tell him, I choked, clawing at the hand holding my hair. Tell him I have something of his son's. The guard paused. He sniffed me, his lip curling. You smell like the whelp from the south. Bring me to Vincent. The guard threw me to the ground. Get up. If you fall behind, I kill you. They dragged me through the fortress. It was a labyrinth of cold stone and silence. There were no servants, no music, no warmth, just warriors sharpening blades and the oppressive weight of power. Finally, they threw me into the throne room. It was a cavernous hall lit only by blue torchlight. At the far end, on a throne made of jagged black glass, sat a shadow. He was huge. Even sitting down, he dwarfed the throne. He wore loose black trousers and nothing else, his chest a landscape of scars and muscle. His hair was long, silver-white like moonlight falling over his face. He didn't look up as I was thrown onto the stone floor. He was cleaning a broadsword with an oil rag. "You brought me a rat," the king said. His voice was deep, a tectonic rumble that I felt in my teeth. "I told you to kill pests at the gate." "She asked for you, my king," the guard said, bowing low. "She mentions the boy." Vincent stopped cleaning the blade. Slowly, terrifyingly, he lifted his head. His eyes were gold, not the yellow of a wolf, but the burning, molten gold of a Lycan king. They locked onto me, and I felt the weight of 300 years of cruelty crash down on my spine. He stood up. He was nearly 7 feet tall. He walked down the steps of the dais, the silence deafening. He circled me like a shark. "You smell like Jackson," he said, his voice laced with disgust. "You smell like his weakness, his vanity." "He rejected me," I whispered, daring to look up at him. Vincent stopped in front of me. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. I could smell him, rain, steel, and a terrifying masculine musk that made my inner wolf whimper. "And you think I care?" he asked softly. "My son throws away garbage every day. Why did you bring his trash to my doorstep?" Chapter 4. The Bargain Garbage. The word echoed in the empty hall. It hit me harder than the cold stone floor. I had walked 3 days, bled into the snow, and lost everything, just to be called trash by the one man who could save me. Vincent turned his back on me, walking toward his throne. "Kill her!" He waved a hand dismissively at the guard. "Throw the body in the ravine." The guard stepped forward, unsheathing a blade. Panic exploded in my chest. But beneath the panic, that ember of rage flared into a bonfire. No. I refused to die like this. I refused to be a footnote in Jackson's story. As the guard reached for me, I moved. Adrenaline gave me speed I didn't know I had. I lunged, not away from them, but toward the guard. I snatched the dagger from his belt before he could react. "Halt!" the guard roared. But I was already moving. I didn't attack them. I spun around and pressed the silver blade against my own jugular. "Stop!" I screamed. The guard froze. Vincent paused on the steps of his dais. Slowly the king turned around. For the first time there was a flicker of something in his golden eyes. Not fear, curiosity. "You have spirit," Vincent rumbled, crossing his arms over his chest. "But if you want to die, little mouse, just press harder. You'll save my guard the trouble of cleaning his blade." My hand trembled, the sharp silver biting into my skin. A trickle of warm blood ran down my neck. "I don't want to die," I said, my voice shaking but clear. "I want to kill him." Vincent tilted his head. "Jackson? He humiliated me. He cast me out. He thinks he is strong because he was born an alpha. He thinks he is better than you." Vincent's eyes narrowed. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Does he?" "He calls you a monster," I lied, "or maybe it was the truth. He says you are a relic, a broken old wolf rotting in a mountain." I took a breath. "I want to destroy him. I want to take everything he loves, but I can't do it alone. I'm weak." "At least you admit it," Vincent sneered. "I admit it," I shouted, tears spilling over. "I am weak, but I don't want to be. Train me, use me, make me a weapon. I don't care what it costs. I will give you anything. My life, my body, my soul. Just help me make him hurt." Vincent stared at me for a long, agonizing minute. He looked at the blood on my neck. He looked at the fire in my eyes. Then he laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "You want to make a deal with the devil, girl? Fine." He walked back down the steps, stopping just out of reach of my knife. "I don't train weaklings," he said coldly. "And I don't give charity. If you want my help, you have to survive my world first." He pointed a clawed finger at the training grounds visible through the archway. 30 days, Vincent said. 30 days in the kill court. You train with my elite guard. No special treatment. No mercy. They will beat you. They will break your bones. If you ring the bell of surrender, you leave, and I never see you again." He leaned in close, his golden eyes burning into mine. "But if you survive, if you are still standing on day 30, I will give you the power to bring the world to its knees." I lowered the knife. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I accept. Vincent smirked. It was a cruel, beautiful expression. Don't accept yet, little mouse. Wait until you see what I have in store for you tomorrow. Chapter 5. Day 1 of Hell. I woke up on a straw mat in a stone cell. My neck stung where I had cut myself, but there was no time to dwell on it. A bucket of ice water splashed over my face, shocking me awake. Up! A voice barked. I gasped, sputtering, scrambling to my feet. It was the guard from yesterday, Kyle. He looked even bigger in the daylight. Training started 5 minutes ago, he growled. You're late. He dragged me out to the courtyard. It was a massive dirt ring surrounded by high stone walls. About 20 Lycan warriors were there, stripped to the waist, sparring. The sound of flesh hitting flesh and the cracking of bones filled the air. High above, on a stone balcony, Vincent sat. He was drinking from a goblet, watching the violence below with bored indifference. He didn't even look at me. Fresh meat, Kyle shouted. The sparring stopped. 20 pairs of predatory eyes turned to me. I felt small, naked. I was wearing a rough tunic and trousers they had given me, but I felt like I was wearing paper armor. The king says she survives or she leaves, Kyle announced. Rules are simple. No shifting. Hand to hand only. First one to stay down for 10 seconds loses. He shoved me into the center of the ring. You're up against Mara. A female Lycan stepped forward. She wasn't bulky like the men, but she was wired with lean, deadly muscle. Her hair was shaved on one side, and she had a scar running through her lip. She looked at me and grinned. Pretty face, Mara said. Shame. She didn't wait for a signal. She lunged. I tried to dodge, remembering the self-defense classes I took in high school. But Lycans move faster than humans, faster than regular wolves. Her fist connected with my stomach. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. I doubled over, retching. Before I could recover, her boot connected with my ribs. Crack. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in my side. I hit the dirt, skidding across the gravel. Get up, Kale shouted. I wheezed, tasting copper. My vision swam. I tried to push myself up, but Mara was on me. She grabbed my hair and slammed my face into the dirt. Stay down, runt, she whispered in my ear. Do yourself a favor. Ring the bell. I looked toward the corner of the courtyard. There was a large iron bell there. All I had to do was ring it. I could go home. Well, not home, but somewhere else. Anywhere but here. I looked up at the balcony. Vincent was watching now. His expression was unreadable. He wasn't rooting for me. He was waiting for me to fail. He expected me to fail. Just like Jax. Just like my mother. You are a defect. The voice in my head sounded like Jax. I gritted my teeth. I spat out a mouthful of bloody dirt. No, I rasped. I planted my hands in the gravel. My ribs screamed in protest, but I pushed. I wobbled. My legs shook, but I stood up. Mara looked surprised. She stepped back, tilting her head. You're an idiot. Again, I wheezed, raising my fists. They were trembling, but they were up. Up on the balcony, Vincent lowered his goblet. For the first time all morning, he leaned forward, his elbows resting on the stone railing. I wasn't a warrior. I was going to lose. I knew that. But I wasn't going to stay down. Mara charged again. This time I didn't close my eyes. Welcome to the kill court. Chapter 6. The Sound of Breaking. By the 7th day, I had forgotten what it felt like to not be in pain. My body was a map of violence. My left eye was swollen shut, turning a gruesome shade of purple. My ribs ached with every breath, a constant reminder of Mara's boot. My knuckles were raw and bloody, the skin split open from punching the rough bark of the ironwood trees during conditioning drills. But I was still here. Kale, the guard captain, didn't go easy on me. If anything, the fact that I refused to ring the bell made him push harder. He wanted to see me break. He wanted to prove to the king that I didn't belong. Again! Kale roared, pacing the perimeter of the dirt ring. I stood opposite a new opponent, Silas. He was younger than Kale, but faster, with claws that he didn't fully retract. Come on, runt, Silas jeered, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Don't make me trip you again. It's getting boring. I didn't answer. I just raised my fists. I was learning that talking wasted breath, and I needed every ounce of oxygen I could get. Silas lunged. I saw the move coming, a telegraphed right hook. I ducked, pivoting on my back foot just like I'd watched the others do. For a split second, I thought I had him. I aimed an uppercut at his exposed stomach, but I was too slow. Silas didn't just dodge. He spun, his elbow coming back with the force of a sledgehammer. It connected squarely with my forearm, which I had raised to block. Snap. The sound was sickeningly loud, like a dry branch stepping on a dead leaf. White-hot agony shot up my arm, blinding me. I screamed, clutching my limb to my chest as I fell to the gravel. "Hold!" Cale barked. The training yard went silent. I curled into a ball in the dirt, gasping for air, sweat mixing with the tears I refused to let fall. My arm was bent at a wrong angle, broken, definitely broken. I looked up through the haze of pain, up at the balcony. Vincent was there. He always was. He stood like a statue, his hands gripping the stone railing. He was looking right at me. He didn't look concerned. He looked expectant. If she breaks a bone, she sets it herself. That was the deal. No healers, no magic. "Well?" Cale walked over, looking down at me with cold indifference. "That looks like a clean break. The bell is right there, Astrid. One ring, and the healers will fix you up. You can be on your way home by sunset." The bell. It looked so shiny, so inviting. Just one ring, and the pain would stop. I looked at the bell, then I looked at the balcony. Vincent hadn't moved. He was waiting for me to quit. He was waiting for Jax's ex-girlfriend to prove she was just a fragile human girl. He rejected you because you are weak. "No," I gritted out. Cale raised an eyebrow. "No?" I sat up, my vision swimming. I bit down on the leather strap of my tunic, tearing a piece off and shoving it between my teeth. "I am staying," I mumbled around the leather. I grabbed my broken forearm with my good hand. I closed my eyes. I thought of Ivy's laugh. I thought of Jax's sneer. I thought of the way my mother looked at the trash can. I screamed into the leather as I jerked my bone back into place. The sound of the grind was worse than the break. Darkness threatened to take me, but I fought it off. I panted, sweat dripping off my nose, my arm throbbing with a pulse of its own. I tore a strip from my hem and tied it tight, making a crude splint. I stood up, I swayed, but I stood. I spat the leather onto the ground and looked Silas in the eye. "Again," I whispered. Up on the balcony, Vincent turned around and walked back into the shadows. But before he disappeared, I saw it. A nod. A single, almost imperceptible nod. Chapter 7. The Midnight Visit. Sleep was impossible. My arm throbbed with a relentless rhythm, keeping time with the storm raging outside the fortress. I lay on my straw mat, shivering. The cell was freezing. The stone walls seemed to suck the heat right out of my bones. I was exhausted, depleted, and starving. They fed me, but only enough to keep me alive, gruel and stale bread. Is this worth it? The thought crept in, insidious and dark. I could be warm right now. I could find a nice omega from a neighboring pack, settle down, forget vengeance. The heavy iron door of my cell creaked open. I stiffened, expecting Cale coming to drag me out for a night drill. But the figure standing in the doorway was too tall, too broad, and the scent, rain, ozone, and ancient power. Vincent. He stepped inside, filling the small space with his presence. He held a torch in one hand, the flickering light casting long dancing shadows across his scarred chest. He was shirtless, as always, wearing loose pants that hung low on his hips. He didn't speak. He walked over to where I lay and crouched down. I tried to sit up, scrambling back against the cold wall. "My king." "Sit still," he commanded. His voice was low, rumbling through the stone floor. He reached out. I flinched, expecting a strike. But his hand, large, calloused, and surprisingly warm, hovered over my broken arm. "You said it well," he said quietly, "though your knot work is sloppy." "I didn't ask for help," I rasped, clutching my makeshift splint. "The deal was—" "I know the deal," he interrupted, his golden eyes locking onto mine. "I made the deal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small glass vial. He uncorked it and set it on the floor between us. It smelled of peppermint and crushed herbs. Bone knit salve, he said. It won't heal it instantly. That would be cheating. But it will take the edge off so you can sleep. I stared at the vial, then back at him. Why? Because you didn't ring the bell, he said simply. And because watching you fight while exhausted is boring. I need you sharp if I'm going to enjoy watching you fail. It was a cruel thing to say, but his tone lacked its usual bite. He sat back on his heels, studying me. Tell me, Astrid, he said, saying my name for the first time without a sneer. Why do you hate him so much? Rejection hurts, yes, but this fire in you, it is not just heartbreak, it is hate. He stole my life, I whispered. I spent 18 years trying to be perfect for him. I suppressed my own personality, my own desires, just to be the Luna he wanted. And when it mattered, he looked at me like I was dirt. I looked down at my hands. And then my family threw me away like I was nothing, because I wasn't useful. Vincent was silent for a long time. The torchlight flickered in his eyes. To be useful is a burden, he said, his voice distant. People only keep you around as long as you serve a purpose. When the purpose is gone, the loyalty fades. He sounded like he was speaking from experience. I looked at the scars on his chest. Claw marks, burn marks, ancient wounds that had healed but never faded. Is that why you live alone? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Because you served your purpose? Vincent's jaw tightened. The air in the room grew heavy. I thought he might kill me for the impertinence. Instead, he stood up, towering over me again. The moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold mask of the king. Drink the salve, he ordered. Tomorrow Kyle is putting you in the pit with the wolves. If you are slow, you will lose more than an arm. He turned and left, the heavy door slamming shut behind him, but he left the torch, and for the first time in a week my cell was warm. Chapter 8. The First Blood Day. 14. 2 weeks in the kill court. I wasn't the same girl who had walked through the gates. That girl was soft. That girl cried when she skinned her knee. The girl in the ring today was covered in mud and dried blood. My hair was matted into a braid. My broken arm was stiff but functional thanks to the salve. And my eyes were constantly scanning for weaknesses. I was sparring with Mara again. For 2 weeks, she had used me as a punching bag. She was stronger, faster, and more experienced, but she was also arrogant. She liked to play with her food. Tired yet, princess? Mara taunted, circling me. She fainted left. I didn't flinch. I had learned something important about Lycans. They relied on their strength. They expected their enemies to try and match that strength. But I couldn't overpower them. I had to outthink them. Mara lunged, aiming a kick at my ribs. Instead of blocking or dodging back, I dropped. I threw myself into the dirt, sliding under her leg. As I slid, I grabbed her planted foot, the ankle. I didn't just pull, I twisted with everything I had. Mara yelped as her balance vanished. She crashed into the dirt face first. Usually this was the part where I scrambled away, but today something primal took over. I didn't retreat. I scrambled up. Before she could roll over, I was on her back. I wrapped my good arm around her neck in a chokehold. Mara roared, thrashing like a bucking bronco. She was strong enough to throw me off. I knew that. But for a split second, I had the advantage. I tightened my grip, squeezing her carotid artery. Yield! I screamed, my voice raw. Mara clawed at my arm, drawing blood, but I didn't let go. I bit down on my lip, enduring the pain, squeezing harder. For 3 glorious seconds, the invincible Lycan warrior was gasping for air. She threw her weight back, slamming me into the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and my grip loosened. Mara spun around, pinning me down, her hand raised to strike. Enough! Vincent's voice cracked like a whip across the courtyard. Mara froze, her fist inches from my face. She looked up at the balcony, breathing hard. Then she looked down at me. There was no mockery in her eyes this time. There was shock, and maybe a tiny sliver of respect. She got off me and offered a hand. I stared at it. Then I took it. She hauled me up. You're getting heavy, Mara grunted, wiping dirt from her face. It was the closest thing to a compliment I was going to get. I looked up at the balcony. Vincent wasn't holding a goblet today. He was leaning over the rail, his eyes intense. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't looking away either. I wiped the blood from my arm and spat on the ground. I had drawn first blood. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. Chapter 9. The Invitation. The atmosphere in the fortress changed on day 20. A rider had arrived at dawn, a messenger from the southern packs. I was eating my morning gruel in the mess hall. I had been promoted from the cell to the barracks, a small victory, when I heard the commotion. Kale marched in holding a scroll sealed with red wax. The smell of the wax hit me instantly. It was mixed with lavender and expensive perfume. Ivy. Astrid, Kyle boomed. The king wants you in the throne room. My stomach dropped. Had I failed? Was he sending me back? I followed Kale to the throne room. Vincent was pacing. He looked furious. The air around him was crackling with static energy, his beast pacing just beneath the surface of his skin. He stopped when he saw me. He held up the scroll. Your former mate is a fool, Vincent growled. What is it? I asked. An invitation, Vincent said, his voice dripping with disdain. To the winter solstice ball. It seems Jackson wants to flaunt his new position as High Alpha of the South. He has invited all the regional leaders, including me. He threw the scroll at me. I caught it. It was heavy, expensive parchment. To Vincent, King of the Deadwoods, you are cordially invited to witness the union of the Crescent Moon Pack and the true rise of the Blackwood bloodline. Come and see what a real alpha looks like. Signed, Alpha Jackson Blackwood. I read the words and my blood boiled. The arrogance, the sheer audacity. He was taunting his own father. He thinks I won't come, Vincent said, stepping closer. He thinks I am too ashamed of my exile to show my face. He wants to prove to the other packs that the Lycan King is obsolete. Vincent looked at me. The ball is in 10 days. That coincides exactly with your 30th day of training. My heart hammered against my ribs. The timeline was closing in. Are we going? I asked. Vincent's eyes narrowed. I haven't decided. You are not ready. You landed one lucky takedown on Mara. That does not make you a queen. If I take you there and you are weak, you humiliate me, and I do not tolerate humiliation. I won't be weak, I said, stepping forward. I wasn't afraid of his anger anymore. I had lived in it for 3 weeks. I have 10 days left. Push me harder. Vincent studied me. He looked at the bruises on my face, the muscle definition beginning to show in my arms, the way I stood with my feet apart, ready for a fight. Harder? He murmured. A dangerous light entered his eyes. Be careful what you wish for, Astrid. The guards have been going easy on you because you are fragile. If you want to be ready for Jackson, you need to train with a monster. He began to unbuckle the heavy leather bracers on his wrists. Clear the room, Vincent ordered the guards. Leave us. Kale and the others didn't hesitate. They practically ran for the doors. I stood alone in the massive hall with the Lycan King. He dropped the bracers to the floor with a heavy thud. Defend yourself, he whispered. Chapter 10. The King's Touch. I had thought Mara was fast. I had thought Kale was strong. I was wrong. They were children playing in a sandbox compared to Vincent. He moved like smoke. 1 second he was 10 feet away, the next his hand was wrapped around my throat, pinning me against a stone pillar. I hadn't even seen him move. Dead, he whispered against my ear. He let go. I gasped, sliding down the pillar. Again! I scrambled up. I tried to kick him. He caught my leg in midair, spun me around, and pressed my back against his chest, his arm locking me in an unbreakable hold. Dead, he growled, his breath hot on my neck. He released me. Again. For hours, he tossed me around the throne room like a rag doll. But unlike the guards, he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to teach me speed. He was teaching me to feel the shift in the air before the strike came. By the time evening fell, I was collapsed on the floor, my chest heaving, sweat soaking my clothes. Chapter 9. The Invitation. The atmosphere in the fortress changed on day 20. A rider had arrived at dawn, a messenger from the southern packs. I was eating my morning gruel in the mess hall. I had been promoted from the cell to the barracks, a small victory, when I heard the commotion. Kale marched in, holding a scroll sealed with red wax. The smell of the wax hit me instantly. It was mixed with lavender and expensive perfume. Ivy. Astrid, Kale boomed. The king wants you in the throne room. My stomach dropped. Had I failed? Was he sending me back? I followed Kale to the throne room. Vincent was pacing. He looked furious. The air around him was crackling with static energy, his beast pacing just beneath the surface of his skin. He stopped when he saw me. He held up the scroll. Your former mate is a fool, Vincent growled. What is it? I asked. An invitation, Vincent said, his voice dripping with disdain. To the winter solstice ball. It seems Jackson wants to flaunt his new position as High Alpha of the South. He has invited all the regional leaders, including me. He threw the scroll at me. I caught it. It was heavy, expensive parchment. To Vincent, King of the Deadwoods, you are cordially invited to witness the union of the Crescent Moon Pack and the true rise of the Blackwood bloodline. Come and see what a real alpha looks like. Signed, Alpha Jackson Blackwood. I read the words and my blood boiled. The arrogance, the sheer audacity. He was taunting his own father. He thinks I won't come, Vincent said, stepping closer. He thinks I am too ashamed of my exile to show my face. He wants to prove to the other packs that the Lycan King is obsolete. Vincent looked at me. The ball is in 10 days. That coincides exactly with your 30th day of training. My heart hammered against my ribs. The timeline was closing in. Are we going? I asked. Vincent's eyes narrowed. I haven't decided. You are not ready. You landed one lucky takedown on Mara. That does not make you a queen. If I take you there and you are weak, you humiliate me, and I do not tolerate humiliation. I won't be weak, I said, stepping forward. I wasn't afraid of his anger anymore. I had lived in it for 3 weeks. I have 10 days left. Push me harder. Vincent studied me. He looked at the bruises on my face, the muscle definition beginning to show in my arms, the way I stood with my feet apart, ready for a fight. Harder? He murmured. A dangerous light entered his eyes. Be careful what you wish for, Astrid. The guards have been going easy on you because you are fragile. If you want to be ready for Jackson, you need to train with a monster. He began to unbuckle the heavy leather bracers on his wrists. Clear the room, Vincent ordered the guards. Leave us. Kale and the others didn't hesitate. They practically ran for the doors. I stood alone in the massive hall with the Lycan King. He dropped the bracers to the floor with a heavy thud. Defend yourself, he whispered. Chapter 10. The King's Touch. I had thought Mara was fast. I had thought Kale was strong. I was wrong. They were children playing in a sandbox compared to Vincent. He moved like smoke. 1 second he was 10 feet away, the next his hand was wrapped around my throat, pinning me against a stone pillar. I hadn't even seen him move. Dead, he whispered against my ear. He let go. I gasped, sliding down the pillar. Again! I scrambled up. I tried to kick him. He caught my leg in midair, spun me around, and pressed my back against his chest, his arm locking me in an unbreakable hold. Dead, he growled, his breath hot on my neck. He released me. Again. For hours, he tossed me around the throne room like a rag doll. But unlike the guards, he wasn't trying to hurt me. He was trying to teach me speed. He was teaching me to feel the shift in the air before the strike came. By the time evening fell, I was collapsed on the floor, my chest heaving, sweat soaking my clothes. Vincent stood over me, barely winded. He reached down. I flinched, expecting another throw, but he didn't grab me. He offered his hand. I took it. He pulled me up, but he didn't let go immediately. We stood there, chests heaving, inches apart. The smell of him was overwhelming. Power, dominance, and something else. Something spicy and alluring. My wolf, the one that had been dormant for 18 years, stirred. It wasn't a whimper this time. It was a purr. Vincent froze. He felt it too. His pupils dilated, swallowing the gold iris until his eyes were almost black. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back up to my eyes. You have a wolf, he murmured, his voice rougher than usual. She's waking up. I can't shift, I whispered. My legs felt weak, but not from exhaustion this time. The tension between us was a physical weight. It was electric, terrifying. You can, Vincent said. He stepped closer, invading my space. His hand moved from my wrist to my waist. His thumb traced the curve of my hip bone through the fabric of my tunic. She just needs a reason. My heart rate spiked. What reason? Vincent leaned down. His lips brushed against the shell of my ear, sending shivers down my spine. Fear, he whispered, or desire. He pulled back abruptly, the cold air rushing between us. He turned his back, walking toward the shadows. Wash up, he commanded, his voice tight. Tomorrow we start at dawn. And Astrid? I paused at the door, my skin still tingling from his touch. Yes? If you fight Jackson the way you fought me today, you will die. Do better. I walked out of the hall, my knees shaking, but as I touched my hip where his hand had been, I realized something. I didn't hate the monster. God help me, I was starting to crave the monster. Chapter 11. The Breaking Point, Day 28. The deadline hung over the fortress like a guillotine blade. The air in the training room was thick enough to choke on. For the past week, Vincent hadn't let up. We trained until my muscles screamed, until my hands shook so badly I couldn't hold a spoon, until I dreamt of blocking and striking. But today was different. Today, Vincent wasn't teaching, he was hunting. Faster! He roared, swinging a heavy wooden staff at my head. I ducked, feeling the wind of the weapon rush past my ear. I rolled across the stone floor, coming up in a crouch. I'm trying! Trying gets you killed, he snarled. He spun the staff, striking my legs. I wasn't fast enough. The wood connected with my thigh with a dull thud. I cried out, collapsing to one knee. Jackson will not pause because you are tired, Vincent said, his voice cold and devoid of pity. He circled me, looming like a nightmare. Ivy will not hesitate because you are in pain. They will tear your throat out while you are trying. Rage flared in my chest, hot, white, and blinding. It wasn't just anger at him, it was anger at the world, at the unfairness of it all. Stop talking about them, I screamed. I lunged. I didn't think about form, I didn't think about defense. I just wanted to wipe that arrogant look off his face. I tackled him around the waist, driving my shoulder into his gut. For the first time, I surprised him. The impact forced him back a step. I didn't stop. I clawed at his chest. I kicked. I fought like a feral animal. I wasn't fighting a king anymore. I was fighting for my existence. Vincent dropped the staff. He grabbed my wrists, pinning them behind my back with one hand. He slammed me against the cold stone wall, his body pressing mine into the unforgiving rock. There, he growled, his face inches from mine. There is the fire. We were breathing heavily, chest to chest. The violence of the moment hung suspended in the air, transforming rapidly into something else, something dangerous. My heart hammered against my ribs, thud, 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 matching the rhythm of his. I could feel the heat radiating off him, burning through my thin tunic. His golden eyes were dilated, consuming me. You have a wolf, Astrid, he whispered, his voice rough with suppressed need. I can hear her scratching at the door. Why won't you let her out? I don't know how, I sobbed, the frustration finally breaking me. I'm a defect. I'm broken. You are not broken, Vincent said fiercely. He released my wrists and grabbed my face in his large hands, forcing me to look at him. You are simply too strong for a weak vessel. You need to break the vessel to let the power out. He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine, a ghost of a kiss that sent lightning straight to my core. Shift, Astrid, he commanded against my mouth, or I will consume you. The threat didn't scare me. It thrilled me. My blood boiled. My skin felt too tight. A pressure built at the base of my spine, an agony that felt like birth and death all at once. But before the snap could happen, the heavy oak doors of the training room burst open. Kale stood there, chest heaving, covered in black blood. My king! Kale shouted. Breach! The southern gates! There was a traitor on the watch! Vincent pulled away from me instantly, the mask of the warrior slamming back into place. but the heat of his touch lingered on my skin like a brand. Chapter 12. The assassin chaos erupted. The alarm horns blasted, a deep, mournful sound that echoed off the mountain peaks. Vincent moved instantly, grabbing his broadsword from the rack. "Stay here," he ordered, turning to me. "Bar the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "I can fight," I argued, adrenaline coursing through me. "No," Vincent roared. It was the first time he had ever raised his voice in fear, not anger. "These aren't rogue wolves. They smell like nightshade. Assassins." He didn't wait for an answer. He sprinted out the door, joining the roar of battle echoing from the lower levels. I stood alone in the silence of the training room. My heart was racing. Nightshade. The poison used to kill shifters. Jackson didn't just want to embarrass his father, he had sent a hit squad. He sent them for me. The realization hit me cold. Jax knew I was here. He knew I was training. He wasn't going to wait for the solstice. He wanted me dead now. I grabbed the wooden staff Vincent had dropped. It wasn't a sword, but it was heavy ironwood. The sounds of fighting grew closer, screams, the tearing of metal, and then silence outside the door. Click. The handle turned. I had barred it, just as Vincent said. Then the wood splintered. A massive claw punched through the thick oak door like it was paper. With a sickening crunch, the door was ripped off its hinges. A wolf stood there. But it wasn't a Lycan. It was smaller, mangy, foaming at the mouth. Its eyes were glazed over with madness, the sign of a wolf doped up on combat stimulants, and on its flank, burned into the fur, was the mark of the crescent moon, Jax's pack. The wolf snarled when it saw me. It shifted, bones cracking, until a man stood there. He was wiry, holding a curved dagger dripping with green liquid. Nightshade. "Found you, little piggy," the assassin hissed. "Alpha Jackson sends his regards." He didn't hesitate. He lunged. I swung the staff. It connected with his shoulder, but he was high on stimulants. He didn't even flinch. He tackled me, driving me into the stone floor. The impact knocked the wind out of me. The dagger came down. I caught his wrist with both hands, the tip of the poison blade hovering inches from my eye. He was stronger. The liquid dripped from the blade, sizzling as it hit the stone next to my ear. One drop in my blood, and I was dead. "Die, runt!" he shrieked, pressing down. My arms trembled. My strength was failing. I looked at the ceiling, thinking this was it. I was going to die on a cold floor, unmourned. "No." A voice spoke in my head. It wasn't my voice. It was deep, ancient, and furious. "They will not touch us." The pressure in my spine returned. This time it wasn't pain. It was power. It was a dam breaking. I didn't push the assassin off. I screamed. And as I screamed, my voice changed. It deepened into a growl that shook the very foundations of the fortress. Chapter 13. The White Wolf. The pain was blinding, white-hot ecstasy. Bones snapped and reformed in milliseconds. My skin split, not to bleed, but to reveal the fur beneath. Usually, a first shift takes minutes. It is slow and agonizing. Mine took seconds. The explosion of power threw the assassin off me. He flew across the room, smashing into the stone wall. He looked up, dazed, his knife clattering away. And then his eyes went wide. Pure, unadulterated terror filled his face. "Shimmering white," he stammered. I stood up, but I wasn't on 2 legs. I was on 4. I looked down at my paws. They were massive, twice the size of a normal wolf's. And they were white. Not the gray of the mountain wolves, not the brown of the forest wolves. I was pure, blinding alabaster like fresh snow on a grave. A white wolf, the rarest lineage, the symbol of royalty, the sign of a queen. The assassin scrambled backward, trying to reach his knife. "Demon!" he shrieked. I didn't bark. I didn't growl. I simply moved. I was a blur of white light. I crossed the room in a single leap. My jaws clamped around his arm, the arm holding the knife. With a sharp jerk of my head, I snapped the bone. He screamed, but I silenced him with a low, vibrating growl against his throat. I didn't kill him. Death was too easy. I pinned him there, my massive weight crushing his chest, my teeth grazing his jugular. The door to the training room filled with shadows. Vincent stood there. He was covered in blood, none of it his own. His broadsword dripped onto the floor. Behind him, Cale and the other guards crowded the hallway, weapons drawn. They all froze. Vincent dropped his sword. The clang of the metal hitting the stone was the only sound in the room. He stared at me. His golden eyes went wide, reflecting my white fur. He didn't look at the assassin. He looked only at me. A white wolf, Cale whispered, falling to his knees. Goddess above, she is royal. The guards behind him dropped to their knees, bowing their heads. In wolf culture, a white wolf was a direct blessing from the moon goddess. To harm one was heresy. To serve one was the highest honor. I looked at Vincent. My inner beast waited. Would he reject me too? Was I too much? Too different? Vincent walked toward me slowly. He didn't bow. A king does not bow. But he did something more significant. He stopped directly in front of my muzzle. He bared his neck, the most vulnerable part of a Lycan, tilting his head to the side. It was a gesture of absolute trust, submission to my nature, if not my rank. Astrid, he whispered, his voice full of reverence. Beautiful. My wolf purred. The rage evaporated, leaving only exhaustion. I released the assassin, who had fainted from fear, and took a step toward Vincent. The world tilted. The adrenaline crashed. I shifted back. Usually, shifting back leaves you naked and vulnerable. I collapsed, my human skin returning, the cold air hitting me. I expected to hit the hard floor. I hit warm, solid muscle instead. Vincent caught me before I touched the ground. He swept me up into his arms, pulling me tight against his blood-soaked chest. I have you, he swore, burying his face in my neck. I have you, my queen. Chapter 14. The Mark. I woke up in the king's bed. It was vast, covered in black furs and smelling of cedar and spice. A fire roared in the massive hearth, casting a warm orange glow over the room. I sat up, groaning. My body felt heavy, but the pain was gone. In fact, I felt incredible. My senses were dialed up to 11. I could hear the crackle of the wood, the wind outside, and the steady heartbeat of the man sitting in the armchair by the fire, Vincent. He was watching me. He had cleaned up. His skin was scrubbed of blood, his wet silver hair slicked back. He wore a loose black robe that left his chest bare. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice low. "Like I could run for days," I said, looking at my hands. They looked the same, but I could feel the power thrumming beneath the skin. I shifted. "You did." Vincent stood and walked to the bed. He sat on the edge, his weight dipping the mattress. "A white wolf. Jackson called you a runt because he was too weak to sense the dormant power of a royal. He threw away a goddess to marry a commoner. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw. He is going to regret it for the rest of his short, miserable life." I leaned into his touch. The bond between us, the one that had been building through the sweat and blood of the training ring, snapped into focus. It wasn't the shallow, faded bond I had felt for Jax. This was deep, ancient, anchored in respect and survival. "The assassin?" I asked. "Alive," Vincent said darkly. "Down in the dungeons, Cale is extracting information. We know Jackson sent him. We know the solstice ball is a trap." "Then we don't go," I said. "No," Vincent shook his head. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip. "Now we must go. Before it was about revenge. Now it is about right. A white wolf must be presented to the council. If I hide you, I insult the goddess." He paused, his eyes darkening. "But you cannot walk into that hall as my student. You cannot walk in as a rogue." "Then how do I walk in?" Vincent leaned forward. He pulled the collar of his robe aside, exposing the junction of his neck and shoulder. The pulse beat strong there. "You walk in as mine," he said roughly. "I want to claim you, Astrid, not because of a contract, not because of your wolf, but because you are the only thing in 3 centuries that has made me feel alive." My breath hitched. To be marked by a Lycan king was irrevocable. It bound our lifespans. It bound our souls. "Jackson," I started. "Is a boy," Vincent growled. "I am a man. I am a king. Choose, Astrid. Do you want revenge, or do you want a dynasty?" I looked at him. I saw the loneliness he had hidden for years. I saw the fierce protector who had pushed me to be strong so I wouldn't die. I reached up and pulled him down to me. "I choose you," I whispered against his lips. He kissed me then, a searing, possessive claim that erased every memory of the boy who had rejected me. And when his teeth grazed the sensitive skin of my neck, marking me as the Lycan queen, I didn't feel pain. I felt finally, truly, whole. Chapter 15. The Departure. 2 days later, the night of the solstice, I stood before the full-length mirror in the king's chambers. I barely recognized the woman staring back. The bruises were gone, healed by the shift and the mating bond. My skin glowed with health. My hair, once dull, cascaded down my back in glossy waves. But it was the eyes that were different. They held a golden fleck now, the mark of Vincent's claim. I wore a dress Vincent had commissioned from the old vaults. It was deep, blood-red velvet that hugged every curve of my new, muscular frame. It was backless, displaying the scars of my training like medals of honor. And on my neck, visible for all to see, was the mark, a swirling silver scar in the shape of a crown. Vincent stepped up behind me in the mirror. He wore a formal military suit of black and silver, his medals gleaming on his chest. He looked lethal, regal, the king of nightmares come to life. He placed a hand on my waist, his eyes meeting mine in the glass. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "No," I answered honestly, and I wasn't. The fear had burned away in the kill court. "Good." Vincent smirked. He reached into a velvet box on the vanity. He pulled out a crown, not a tiara, a war crown, spikes of black obsidian and silver. He placed it gently on my head. It was heavy. It felt right. "The car is waiting," he said. "The drive to the Crescent Moon territory is 4 hours. We will arrive exactly at midnight." I turned to face him. I ran my hand down the lapel of his jacket. "Vincent?" "Yes, my queen?" "When we get there," I said softly, a cruel smile touching my lips, "don't kill Jax immediately. I want him to watch." Vincent threw his head back and laughed, a sound of pure, dark delight. He kissed my forehead. "As you wish," he promised. We walked out of the room, hand in hand. The corridors were lined with guards. Kyle, Mara, Silas. They didn't sneer anymore. As we passed, they slammed their fists over their hearts and bowed low. We weren't just going to a party, we were going to war. And for the first time in history, the Moonstone Pack was about to realize that they had thrown away the sun, only to be devoured by the night. Chapter 16. The Lion's Den. The sleek, armored limousine wound its way down the mountain pass, moving like a predator through the night. Inside, the silence was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the calm before the slaughter. I sat next to Vincent, his hand resting possessively on my thigh. His thumb traced idle circles on the velvet of my dress, a grounding rhythm against the frantic beating of my heart. "We are crossing the border," Vincent murmured, looking out the tinted window. I looked out. The dense, ancient pines of the deadwoods gave way to the manicured, rolling hills of the Crescent Moon territory. My old home. Memories assaulted me. The forest where I used to play, the high school where I was bullied, the pack house where my mother had thrown away my things. I felt a spike of nausea. The old Astrid, the weak, frightened girl trying to claw her way to the surface. "You are not her anymore," I reminded myself. "She died in the kill court." "I can hear your heart," Vincent said softly. "It's racing." "I'm not scared," I lied. "It is not fear," he corrected. "It is anticipation. You are a wolf returning to the den that kicked you out. You want blood." He was right. I didn't just want them to see me, I wanted to devastate them. The car slowed as we approached the pack house. It was lit up like a palace. Expensive cars lined the driveway. I could see alphas from neighboring packs milling about on the lawn, holding champagne flutes, laughing. Jackson had gone all out. This wasn't just a party, it was his coronation. He was showing the world that he was the big dog now. "Ready?" Vincent asked as the car came to a stop at the bottom of the grand staircase. "Ready," I breathed. The driver opened the door. The cold winter air rushed in, carrying the scents of roasted boar, expensive wine, and Arrogance. Vincent stepped out first. The effect was instantaneous. The chatter on the lawn died. A hush swept over the crowd like a wave. Vincent, the myth, the monster of the mountains, stood there in his black military dress, radiating an alpha aura so potent it made the air vibrate. He turned and extended his hand into the car. I took it. I stepped out. The red velvet of my dress spilled onto the pavement like a pool of blood. I stood tall, my chin lifted, the obsidian crown glinting in the moonlight. The silence on the lawn deepened. I saw my old neighbors. I saw the girls who used to trip me in the hallway. I saw the beta who had laughed when Jax rejected me. Their mouths hung open. They didn't recognize me. They saw the dress, the crown, the power, but they couldn't reconcile this goddess with the runt they knew. Vincent tucked my hand into the crook of his arm. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. "Head high, my queen," he whispered. "Let them look. Let them fear." We began the ascent up the stairs. Chapter 17. The Eclipse. The grand ballroom of the Crescent Moon Pack was a riot of golden noise. A live orchestra played a waltz. Waiters weaved through the crowd. At the far end, on two golden thrones raised on a dais, sat Jackson and Ivy. Jackson looked smug. He was laughing at something a neighboring alpha said, holding a goblet of wine. Ivy sat beside him, looking bored, playing with a diamond necklace that I recognized. It had belonged to Jackson's grandmother. "That was meant for me," the old Astrid whispered. "You have a crown now. Let her keep the trinket," the wolf replied. The double doors at the entrance were closed. We stood behind them. "Announce us," Vincent commanded the trembling doorman. The doorman, a young wolf who looked like he was about to faint, banged his staff 3 times on the floor. The music stopped. The room fell silent. "Presenting," the doorman's voice cracked, then he cleared his throat. "Presenting His Royal Majesty Vincent, High King of the Lycans." A gasp went through the room. Jackson stood up abruptly, his wine splashing onto his hand. He hadn't expected his father to actually come. "And—" The doorman paused, looking at me with wide, terrified eyes. He didn't know how to introduce me. Vincent stepped forward, pushing the doors open with a wave of his hand. They slammed against the walls with a thunderous bang. "And his mate," Vincent finished, his voice booming through the hall without a microphone. "Queen Astrid." We walked in. If the lawn had been quiet, the ballroom was a tomb. Every head turned, every eye widened. I walked in step with Vincent, the red dress trailing behind me. I felt the collective shock hit me like a physical force. I saw my parents near the buffet table. My mother dropped her plate, the ceramic shattering on the floor. But I only had eyes for the dais. Jackson's face had drained of all color. He stared at me, blinking rapidly as if trying to clear a hallucination. He looked at the crown. He looked at the mark on my neck. He looked at Vincent's hand on my waist. Ivy stood up slowly. Her face wasn't pale. It was red, furious. She looked at me, then down at her own dress, a store-bought designer gown that suddenly looked cheap next to my royal velvet. We stopped in the center of the dance floor. The crowd parted, creating a wide circle around us. "Father!" Jackson choked out. He tried to sound authoritative, but his voice was thin. You brought a guest." "I brought my wife," Vincent corrected smoothly. He looked around the room, his lip curling in distaste. "Lovely party, Jackson, a bit loud. But then, you always did prefer noise over substance." Jackson descended the steps of the dais, marching toward us. He stopped 5 feet away. He ignored his father and glared at me. "Astrid?" He laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Is this a joke? You dressed the runt up in a costume?" He looked at the crowd, spreading his hands. "Everyone, look! My father has picked up my scraps." The room held its breath. I let go of Vincent's arm. I took a step toward Jackson. "Scraps?" I asked. My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear, and thanks to the wolf waking up, it carried a resonance of command. I smiled. "You rejected me because I was weak, Jackson. You wanted a strong wolf." I let my eyes flash, just for a second. The golden-white glow of the royal Lycan illuminated the dim room. Careful what you wish for. Chapter 18. The Regret. The moment my eyes flashed, the scent hit him. I wasn't suppressing it anymore. I let my aura unfurl like a banner. The scent of winter, blood, and royalty washed over Jackson. He stumbled back as if I had slapped him. His nostrils flared. His wolf, the inner beast that recognizes power, whimpered. I saw it in his eyes. He realized instantly what I was. White wolf. No, Jackson whispered, shaking his head. Impossible. You're a defect. You couldn't shift. I was dormant, I said, stepping closer, waiting for a real alpha to wake me up. The insults landed perfectly. The crowd murmured. Jackson's face twisted in rage. You belong to me, he snapped, his control slipping. We were fated. You can't be with him. He's my father. Biologically, perhaps. Vincent stepped up beside me, his presence looming over Jackson like a storm cloud. But a father teaches his son honor. I clearly failed in that regard. Vincent looked at Jackson with cold disappointment. You threw away a white wolf, boy, a creature of legend, because you were too impatient to wait for her to bloom. And now... Vincent reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch possessive and tender. Now she is a queen, and you are just a child playing dress-up in a big chair. I am the alpha of this pack, Jackson roared, his eyes flashing yellow. You are on my territory, old man. I command you to leave her. It was a mistake, a massive, fatal mistake. You do not use the alpha command on a king. Vincent didn't yell. He didn't even shift. He simply released his pressure. The air in the room became heavy, crushing. It felt like gravity had increased tenfold. Every wolf in the room dropped to their knees, gasping, unable to stand under the weight of the king's dominance. Jackson tried to fight it. He shook, sweat pouring down his face, his knees buckling. Kneel, Vincent said softly. Jackson slammed into the floor. I was the only one left standing. The king's dominance didn't hurt me, it caressed me, it recognized me as equal. I looked down at Jackson, kneeling at my feet. The man who had sneered at me, the man who had broken me. You look better down there, I said coldly. Ivy, who was on her hands and knees beside him, looked up. Her eyes were full of venom. You betch, she hissed. You think wearing a crown changes anything? You're still just my weak little sister. You slept your way to power. I looked at Ivy. I felt a twinge of pity. She was so small. I fought for this power, Ivy, I said, touching the scar on my arm. I bled for it. You wouldn't last 1 hour in the world I survived. Chapter 19. The Alpha Command. Vincent pulled back his aura, allowing the room to breathe again. Slowly, the guests scrambled to their feet, looking terrified. The party was over. The trial had begun. Jackson stood up, humiliated. His face was purple with rage. He had been shamed in front of his entire pack, in front of his allies. He needed to regain control. This is a trick, Jackson spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. Some dark magic. You're not a white wolf. You're a fraud. He looked at the crowd. My father hates me. He is using her to mock me. She is no queen. Careful, Jackson, Vincent warned, his hand drifting to the hilt of the ceremonial sword at his hip. Insulting the queen is punishable by death. I challenge her. The words rang out, sharp and final. Ivy stepped forward, wiping her mouth. She stood next to Jackson, her eyes manic. I challenge her. If she's a queen, let her prove it. By pack law, any wolf can challenge for rank. The crowd gasped. A challenge at a solstice ball was unheard of. It was barbaric. Ivy! My mother shouted from the crowd, stepping forward. No! Shut up, Mother! Ivy screamed. She looked at me. You stole my moment, Astrid. You always ruin everything. I am the Luna here. I am the strongest female in this pack. I challenge you to the circle. Vincent stepped in front of me. She is a high queen. She does not fight subordinates. No, I said, placing a hand on Vincent's chest. He looked down at me, concern in his eyes. Astrid, you don't have to. You have nothing to prove to these people. I have everything to prove, I whispered. I looked at Ivy. She was fit, strong, and had been shifting for years. She was a trained fighter, but she had trained in a gym with padded mats. I had trained in the kill court. I stepped around Vincent. I looked my sister in the eye. I accept, I said, but not just for rank. For what then? Ivy sneered. For title, I said calmly. If I win, Jackson abdicates. The Crescent Moon Pack becomes a vassal to the Lycan king. And you? I looked her up and down. You admit in front of everyone that you are the weak one. And if I win? Ivy asked. If you win, I gestured to Vincent, the king leaves, and I will never return. Deal, Jackson shouted, eager to see me destroyed. To the garden, now. Chapter 20. The Trap. The garden was a misnomer. It was a fighting pit behind the pack house, a circle of packed earth surrounded by torches. The guests crowded around the perimeter, their finery contrasting with the savagery of the moment. The snow had started to fall again, dusting the ground in white. I stood on one side, stripping off my velvet dress. I was wearing a black combat bodysuit underneath, Vincent's idea. He knew this would happen. Ivy stood on the other side. She shifted immediately. Her wolf was beautiful, sleek, brown, and fast. She snarled, snapping her jaws at the crowd, riling them up. "Kill her, Luna!" someone shouted. I looked at Vincent. He stood at the edge of the ring, his arms crossed. He gave me a single nod. Survive. I didn't shift. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. "Shift, coward!" Jackson yelled from the sidelines. I didn't want to shift. Not yet. I wanted to beat her as a human first. I wanted to show her that power wasn't just about teeth and claws. "Begin!" the beta referee shouted. Ivy charged. She was fast, a brown blur of fur and teeth aiming for my throat. I didn't move until the last second. I remembered Mara. I remembered the pain of broken ribs. This was slow. I sidestepped. Ivy's jaws snapped on empty air. As she flew past, I drove my elbow into her flank. She yelped, tumbling into the dirt. She scrambled up, furious. She lunged again, this time going for my legs. I jumped, vaulting over her back. I landed in a crouch and spun, sweeping her back legs out from under her. She crashed down again. "Is that it?" I asked, breathing evenly. "Is that the best the Crescent Moon Luna can do?" Ivy roared. She abandoned strategy. She attacked with pure rage. She managed to clip me. Her claws tore through my sleeve, raking my arm. The sting was sharp, familiar. "Blood!" Jackson cheered. Ivy circled, tasting the blood in the air. She thought she had me. She lunged for the kill, but as she moved, I saw something glint in the torchlight. Wait. Wolves don't glint. On Ivy's back paw, hidden between her toes, was a metal spur, coated in green liquid. Nightshade. It wasn't a fair fight. It was an execution. Jackson had rigged it. If she kicked me, I died. Time slowed down. I looked at Jackson. He was grinning. He knew. The rage that I had kept on a leash? The leash snapped. Cheaters. I didn't dodge this time. As Ivy flew at me, I let the beast out. Crack. I shifted midair. The white wolf exploded into existence, twice the size of Ivy. I caught her in midair, my jaws clamping around her neck before her poisoned spur could touch me. I slammed her into the ground. The impact shook the earth. I stood over her, my massive white paw pressing her head into the mud. I growled, a sound like thunder. I looked at Jackson. I bared my teeth. Game over. Chapter 21. The evidence. I held Ivy's throat between my jaws. I could feel her pulse fluttering wildly against my tongue, fast, terrified, like a rabbit caught in a snare. The crowd was screaming, a chaotic mix of "kill her" and "stop." But I tuned them out. My focus was on the metal spur hidden in the fur of her hind leg. I tightened my grip just enough to make her whimper. Then I released her neck. Before she could scramble away, I clamped my teeth around her back leg, right over the hidden weapon. I ripped it free. Ivy screamed as the strap broke, tearing a patch of fur with it. I spat the metal object onto the snowy ground in the center of the ring. It landed with a dull clink. The green liquid coating the tip sizzled against the frozen earth, releasing a pungent, sour smell that every wolf recognized instantly. Nightshade. I stepped back and shifted. The change was fluid now, painless. I stood naked in the snow for only a second before Vincent was there, draping his heavy military coat over my shoulders. He wrapped me in warmth and the scent of sandalwood. "Look!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the noise. I pointed at the spur. "Look at how your alpha fights." The crowd surged forward. An elder from the pack, a man who had known me since I was a pup, knelt down to inspect it. He recoiled, covering his nose. "Nightshade," the elder announced, his voice trembling with rage. He looked up at Jackson. "Poison in a sacred challenge? This is treason against the moon goddess." The mood in the garden shifted instantly. It went from a spectator sport to a lynch mob. Wolves value honor above all else. To cheat in a duel was bad. To use poison was unforgivable. Jackson stood on the sidelines, his face pale as a sheet. "She planted it," he stammered, pointing at me. "She's a witch. She put it there to frame my Luna." "Liar!" I stepped forward, the king's coat trailing in the snow behind me like a royal cape. "You stood there and cheered when she tried to kick me. You knew. You wanted me dead because you couldn't handle the truth." I looked down at Ivy, who was shivering in the mud, back in her human form. She was sobbing, clutching her leg. "You aren't a Luna," I said coldly, looking her in the eye. "You are a coward." I turned to the crowd. "Is this who you want leading you? An alpha who cheats? A Luna who needs poison to fight a runt?" "No!" the crowd roared back. Jackson panicked. He saw his power slipping away like water through fingers. His eyes went wild. "Guards!" Jackson screamed, his voice cracking. "Kill them! Kill the intruders! They are threatening the Alpha!" Chapter 22. The Knee Bends. The command hung in the freezing air. "Kill them!" Jackson screamed again, pointing at Vincent and me. 12 pack enforcers, wolves sworn to protect the Alpha, stepped forward. They looked uncertain. They looked at Jackson, then at the spur on the ground, then at me. "I am your Alpha," Jackson roared, veins bulging in his neck. "Obey me!" The enforcers shifted their weight. Duty warred with honor. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to advance, drawing their weapons. They were going to follow orders. Vincent stepped in front of me. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't even raise his fists. He simply took a breath and let his true nature flood the space. "One step," Vincent said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a mountain range. "Take one more step, and I will slaughter every single one of you before you can blink." The enforcers froze. "He is a traitor," Vincent continued, pointing a lazy finger at Jackson without looking at him. "He has violated the sacred laws of the duel. By pack law, his title is forfeit." Vincent looked at the lead enforcer. "Who do you serve, soldier? A boy who uses poison, or the High King?" The lead enforcer looked at Jackson. He saw a sweating, terrified boy. Then he looked at Vincent. He saw a legend. Then he looked at me. The White Wolf. The Queen. The enforcer sheathed his sword. Slowly, deliberately, he dropped to one knee. He bowed his head toward me. "I serve the White Wolf," the enforcer said. One by one, the other 11 guards followed suit. The clatter of weapons hitting the ground echoed in the silence. Within seconds, the entire security force of the Crescent Moon Pack was kneeling in the snow before me. Jackson stood alone. Even Ivy had crawled away from him. "No," Jackson whispered. "No, you can't. I am the Alpha." I walked past the kneeling guards. I walked right up to Jackson. Vincent stayed back, letting me take this moment. Jackson looked at me. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. "You were never an Alpha, Jax," I said softly. "You were just a bully with a title." I reached out and ripped the Alpha insignia, a silver crescent pin, off his lapel. "I claim this pack," I announced, raising the pin for all to see. "By right of conquest, by right of blood, and by the will of the king." "Long live the Queen," the elders shouted. "Long live the Queen," the crowd chanted, the sound deafening. Jackson fell to his knees not because of a command, but because his legs simply gave out. He wept. I looked down at him and felt nothing. No love, no hate, just indifference. He was small. He was the past. Chapter 23. The Blood Betrayal. The celebration that followed was awkward, at least for the guests. The music started up again, but the atmosphere had changed. It wasn't a party anymore, it was a regime change. I stood in the center of the ballroom, Vincent by my side. He was drinking whiskey, watching the room with a satisfied smirk. "You handled that well," he murmured. Taking the pin was a nice touch, dramatic. I learned from the best, I said, leaning into him. Astrid. The voice came from behind me. It was familiar, painfully familiar. I turned around. My parents stood there. My father looked ashamed, staring at his shoes. My mother, however, was beaming. She had fixed her hair and wiped away the shock. Now she wore a look of desperate hope. "Oh, my baby!" my mother cried, reaching out as if to hug me. "I knew it! I always knew you were special!" I took a step back. Vincent moved slightly, placing himself between them and me, a low growl rumbling in his chest. My mother stopped, her hands hovering in the air. "Astrid, sweetheart, tell the king it's okay. We're your family." "Family?" I repeated the word. It tasted like ash. "Of course," she laughed nervously. "We were just protecting you. We had to be tough on you so your wolf would come out. It was all part of the plan, and now look at you. A queen, we're so proud." She looked at Vincent. "Your Majesty, surely you understand. We raised her to be strong." I stared at her. I remembered the night in the rain. I remembered the garbage bins. I remembered her slamming the door in my face while I bled. "You didn't raise me to be strong," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "You raised me to be a spare part, and when you thought I was broken, you threw me away." "Astrid, be reasonable," my father spoke up, his voice pleading. "We are your parents. You can't turn your back on us. Think of our status. With you as queen, we could be—" "You could be nothing," I interrupted. I looked at Vincent. "What is the punishment for those who abandon a pack member in distress?" Vincent looked at my parents, his eyes cold as ice. "Exile." My mother's face went white. "Astrid, no, you can't. This is our home." "You made it clear I had no home here," I said. "You chose Ivy. You bet on the wrong horse." I pointed to the door. "Get out. Pack your things. You have until sunrise to leave Crescent Moon territory. If you are found here tomorrow, the guards will hunt you down." "Astrid, please!" my mother sobbed, falling to her knees, grabbing the hem of the coat I was wearing. "I'm your mother!" I pulled the coat away from her grasp. "My mother died the night she left me in the rain," I said softly. "I am an orphan, and I am a queen." I turned my back on them. "Guards, escort them out." As they were dragged away, screaming and begging, I felt Vincent's hand squeeze my shoulder. It wasn't just comfort, it was pride. I didn't cry. I had shed enough tears for them. Chapter 24. The Empty Throne. The pack house was quiet. The guests had left. The traitors had been locked in the holding cells. I walked into the Alpha's office, Jackson's office. It smelled of leather and stale cigar smoke. It smelled like him. I walked over to the massive mahogany desk and ran my finger along the edge. I used to dream of sitting in this room, helping Jackson run the pack. I used to imagine our children playing on the rug. Now I owned it all. And Jackson was in a cell in the basement awaiting my judgment. "It suits you," Vincent said. He was leaning against the doorframe, watching me. He had taken off his military jacket, standing in his white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked tired but happy. "I never wanted this," I admitted, sitting down in the massive leather chair. It swiveled. I just wanted to be enough. Vincent walked over. He placed his hands on the armrests, boxing me in. He leaned down until our noses touched. "You were always enough, Astrid," he whispered. "The crown doesn't make you a queen. The wolf doesn't make you a queen. You are the queen. The rest is just decoration." He kissed me. It was slow, tender, and full of promises. "What do we do with him?" I asked, breaking the kiss. "Jackson." Vincent straightened up, his expression hardening. "He committed treason. He used poison. The punishment is death." I looked at the desk. I thought about killing Jackson. It would be easy. It would be justice. "No," I said. Vincent raised an eyebrow. "Mercy?" "Cruelty," I corrected. "If I kill him, he becomes a martyr. He becomes a tragedy. I don't want him to be remembered." I stood up. "I want him to live. I want him to watch." "Watch what?" Everything, I said, walking to the window that overlooked the territory. I want him to watch me rule his pack better than he ever could. I want him to watch his father love me in a way he never could. I want him to live a long, miserable life as an Omega, scrubbing floors in the house he used to own. I turned back to Vincent. Strip him of his wolf, bind his powers, make him human, and make him the servant. Vincent smiled. It was a wicked, terrifying smile. A fate worse than death, he mused. I like it. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as we looked out over the snowy lands. The crescent moon pack is yours, my love, he said. But the deadwoods are still mine. We have 2 kingdoms now. We have an empire, I corrected. Vincent laughed. An empire, I suppose we do. He kissed my neck, right over the mark. But first, we have a wedding night to finish. We never did get to the honeymoon part of the evening. I turned in his arms, tangling my fingers in his silver hair. The adrenaline of the fight was fading, replaced by a different kind of heat. Take me home, Vincent, I whispered. Take me to the mountains. As you wish, he growled, sweeping me up into his arms. We left the office empty. The throne was mine, but my home wasn't in this house anymore. My home was in the arms of the monster who had saved me. Chapter 25. The Breaking of the Wolf. The dungeon beneath the Crescent Moon Pack house smelled of damp earth and despair. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the ballroom above, but it was where the real work of the night had to be finished. I stood outside the iron bars, still wearing my blood-red velvet gown, the obsidian crown heavy and grounding on my head. Vincent stood beside me, his sleeves rolled up, his hands glowing with a faint, ancient runic light. Inside the cell, Jackson sat huddled in the corner. He looked small. Stripped of his fine suit, wearing only ragged trousers, he looked nothing like the arrogant alpha who had destroyed my life on my birthday. Please, Jackson whispered, looking up. His eyes were red-rimmed. Astrid, don't do this. Just exile me. Let me go. Exile is for wolves, I said, my voice echoing off the stone walls. It allows you to start over, to join a rogue pack, to pretend you are still someone of value. I gripped the iron bars. But you aren't a wolf, Jackson. You proved that when you used poison. You have no honor, so I am taking away the only thing that gave you unearned power. Vincent unlocked the cell door. He stepped in. The air pressure in the room dropped instantly. Jackson scrambled back, pressing himself against the stone, whimpering. Hold him, Vincent commanded. 2 guards, former enforcers of Jackson, stepped in. They grabbed their former alpha by the arms, dragging him to the center of the cell. They didn't look at him with pity. They looked at him with disgust. Vincent placed his hand on Jackson's forehead. By the laws of the ancient Lycan bloodline, Vincent chanted, his voice taking on a dual, harmonic quality, the voice of the king and the beast combined. I invoke the right of severance. I revoke your gift. You are unworthy of the moon's blessing. You are unworthy of the shift. Jackson screamed. It wasn't a scream of physical pain, but spiritual amputation. I watched as a golden mist began to pull away from his body. It was his wolf, his inner beast, being forcibly separated from his soul. The wolf spirit howled, a sound of sorrow and release before dissolving into the damp air, returning to the moon goddess. Jackson slumped forward, gasping. He looked different, diminished. The subtle glow of health that shifters possess was gone. His hearing, his speed, his strength, all vanished in an instant. He was just a man, a weak, ordinary man. Vincent stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag as if he had touched something filthy. It is done, Vincent said. He is human. He will age like a human. He will heal like a human. And he will serve like a human. I walked into the cell. I looked down at Jackson. He looked up at me, his eyes empty. He couldn't smell my scent anymore. He couldn't feel the power radiating off me. To him, I was just a woman in a dress. You will scrub the floors of the Great Hall, I ordered. You will wash the dishes of the Omegas. You will serve the pack you thought you were too good for. And every day when you look at the moon, you will remember what you threw away. I turned on my heel, my dress swishing around me. Let's go, I said to Vincent. We have a wedding to plan. We left him there in the dark. The silence behind us was absolute. He didn't scream or beg anymore. He had nothing left to beg with. Chapter 26. The Sweetest Revenge. 6 months later. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of the Alpha's office. I sat at the mahogany desk, signing off on the new trade agreements with the northern packs. Life had settled into a rhythm, a busy, chaotic, beautiful rhythm. Ruling 2 territories, the Crescent Moon and the Lycan Kingdom, was exhausting, but rewarding. Under our rule, the Crescent Moon Pack was thriving. We had abolished the old hierarchy that mistreated runts and omegas. Strength was no longer just about muscles, it was about contribution. The door opened. A servant walked in carrying a tray of tea and biscuits. He walked with a shuffle, his head bowed low. He wore the gray uniform of the lowest domestic staff. His hands, once manicured and soft, were red and chapped from harsh soap and scrubbing brushes. He placed the tray on the edge of my desk with trembling hands. "Your tea, my queen," he mumbled, keeping his eyes on the floor. I didn't look up from my paperwork immediately. I let the silence stretch. I took a sip of the tea. It was perfect. "Thank you, Jackson," I said coolly. He flinched at his name. He hated that I used it. He preferred to be invisible. He turned to leave, picking up the wastebasket to empty it. As he bent down, he caught sight of the framed photo on my desk. It was a picture of Vincent and me from our official mating ceremony 3 months ago. In the photo, Vincent was looking at me with such raw, unhidden adoration that it made my heart ache just seeing it. I looked radiant, powerful, and undeniably happy. Jackson stared at the photo. For a second, the mask of the servant slipped, and I saw the agony beneath, the regret. He looked at me, at the glowing skin, the confidence, the slight curve of my stomach that was just beginning to show beneath my silk blouse. He knew, even without wolf senses, he knew. "Is there something else?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "No, my queen," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Nothing." He hurried out of the room, closing the door softly. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Seeing him didn't bring me joy exactly, but it brought me peace. Justice had been served. He wasn't dead. He was living with his mistake every single day. That was a far heavier burden than a grave. The door opened again, but this time there was no knock. Vincent strode in. He brought the smell of the outdoors, wind and pine, with him. He looked magnificent, his silver hair tied back, his face relaxed. "I saw the servant leaving," Vincent said, coming around the desk. "He looked like he'd seen a ghost." "He saw the future he lost," I said, pushing the paperwork away. Vincent pulled me up from the chair. He sat down and pulled me onto his lap, his large hands settling protectively over my stomach. "How is the air today?" he murmured against my neck, his voice rumbling against my spine. "Hungry?" I laughed. "Your son demands strawberries." "My son shall have an entire field of strawberries," Vincent promised. He kissed my shoulder, then rested his cheek against my hair. "You know, Astrid, for 300 years I thought my bloodline ended with Jackson. I thought I had failed." His hand moved over the baby bump, gentle and awed. "You gave me back my future," he whispered. "You gave me a second chance to get it right." I turned in his arms, cupping his scarred face. I looked into his golden eyes, eyes that used to be so cold, now filled with warmth. "We gave it to each other," I said. He kissed me then, deep and slow. In the office that used to belong to the boy who rejected me, in the arms of the king who cherished me, I realized that I didn't hate Jackson anymore. I was grateful to him. If he hadn't broken me, I never would have found the man who made me whole. Chapter 27. The White Queen's Legacy. 5 years later. The winter snow lay thick over the deadwoods, but the fortress wasn't cold anymore. It was filled with noise, light, and the sound of running feet. "Catch me, Papa!" A small blur of motion tore through the great hall. Vincent, the terrifying Lycan king, the monster of the mountains, was on his hands and knees on the rug, growling playfully. "I'm going to get you, little wolf," Vincent roared, lunging forward. Our son Arian squealed with delight. He was 4 years old, with Vincent's silver hair and my eyes, and even at 4 he was fast. He scrambled up the side of the sofa, laughing. "Mama, save me!" Arian shouted as I walked into the room. I smiled, leaning against the archway. "You're on your own, kid. Never get cornered by a Lycan." Vincent caught him, scooping him up into the air. Arian laughed, kicking his legs. Vincent buried his face in the boy's tummy, blowing raspberries until Arian was breathless with giggles. I watched them, my heart swelling so much it felt like it might burst. Vincent, the man who had lived in silence for centuries, was the most devoted father I had ever seen. He didn't try to make Arian tough like he had with Jackson. He didn't demand perfection. He just loved him. He taught him honor, yes, but he also taught him kindness. Vincent set Arian down. "Go wash up for dinner, and don't shift in the hallway." "Okay," Arian sprinted off. Vincent stood up, straightening his tunic. He saw me watching him and smiled, walking over to wrap his arms around my waist. "He's getting fast," Vincent noted. "He's a white wolf," I reminded him. "He's going to be faster than both of us." We walked out onto the balcony, looking over our domain. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. In the distance, I could see the smoke rising from the chimneys of the village. It was peaceful. "Do you ever think about it?" Vincent asked quietly, looking toward the south. I knew what he meant. Did I think about the rejection? About the pain? About the girl who cried in the mud? "Sometimes," I admitted. "I think about the girl I was. She was so desperate to be loved. She thought her life was over because one boy couldn't see her value." I looked up at Vincent. The wind caught his silver hair. He looked like a god of winter, but his eyes were pure summer warmth. "But then I remember," I continued, "that rejection was the key to the cage. If Jax hadn't opened the door, I never would have walked out. I never would have found my strength. I never would have found you." Vincent pulled me closer, kissing the top of my head. "He chose your sister," Vincent murmured, echoing the words that had started this entire journey. I smiled, resting my head on his chest, listening to the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "He chose my sister," I agreed softly, "and because of that, I became a queen." I looked out at the horizon, where the moon was just beginning to rise, full, bright, and beautiful. "Thank you, Jackson," I whispered to the wind. "Thank you for letting me go." Vincent took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine. "Come inside, my love," he said. "It's getting cold." "I'm not cold," I said, looking at him. "I haven't been cold since the day I met you." We turned and walked back inside, closing the doors against the night, leaving the ghosts of the past in the snow where they belonged. The end.